had to put that on people before. That usually wakes people up real quick.
Bridget?
Hi, I see you.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the Naperville Park District Board of Commissioners regular board meeting. Today is Thursday, July 26th. Time is 6:30 p.m. Bridget, call the roll, please. Here. 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 Present. Here. 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 Next item is matters from the public. Bridget, do we have anyone signed up to speak on non-agenda items? Move on to consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda?
B as in Bravo, please.
Move to accept consent agenda item A.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Vice President Janet?
Yes.
Commissioner Todd?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Egan?
Aye.
Commissioner Ensign?
Yes.
Commissioner King?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes.
Move to approve consent agenda as accepted.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. This is voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
Move on to unfinished business. Move to approve the June 28, 2018 regular meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
I was out with DC fishing, so I'm going to abstain.
I'm sorry, Bill.
I wasn't present for the meeting, so I'm not going to be able to vote for the minutes. Oh, the meeting, so I'm just going to abstain.
Any other discussion? Would you call the roll, please?
Vice President Janet?
Yes.
Commissioner Ensign?
Yes.
Commissioner Todd?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Egan?
Abstain.
Commissioner King? President Riley?
Yes. Move on to new business discussion items. We are substituting a newly added item, smoking in the parks. Do we have anyone signed up to speak on this item?
We do not.
Okay. Dirk or Ray, you want to start us off on this?
Well, I'll let her explain the legal aspects of things in a second. But this discussion started a few months ago with an incident that occurred in Millennium Park involving a resident and I guess that would classify ignorant baseball player who got into an argument about smoking in parks and basically, as I said, oftentimes it's hard to legislate common sense. And this person, not the resident that brought this to my attention, but the other one, chose not to use common sense, and so I received some communication from the resident, and the discussion ensued. And at the last Park and Recs committee meeting, we had the resident, I believe it was two other residents that attended the committee meeting and spoke on behalf of banning smoking in our parks. There was another discussion amongst the Park and Rec committee members that were there and staff, and let them speak for themselves. But out of that came a consensus that we think it's a good idea to go, in fact, do that, but to create an area and basically, correct me if I'm wrong, it's either the parking lot or the closest adjacent street where parking is permitted to go ahead and smoke. And so Dirk then put the pen and paper and created an ordinance which he circulated with you. I also circulated with the resident. The resident circulated with a few of the others that were meeting, and all were in concurrence that it seems like a very good middle ground to me. There was a question about smoking on the Riverwalk. Could that also be banned? And the answer to that is no, that's not our place. That would be something that if they were interested, they could take it up at the Riverwalk Commission in the city. But for right now, the proposal is to ban it. We will go ahead and signage areas. Just working through that as to where those signs will go. The enforcement aspect of it is if somebody chooses to be ignorant and courteous, it would be a citation. The other ordinances we have.
Dirk, before you speak, let me just make some comments. This is a discussion item tonight. It's not an agenda item, so we will not be voting on this tonight. This is merely to discuss the concept and see what we do moving forward. Dirk and Rich, after Dirk.
So in drafting it, among our state compliance or so in the parks, there's everything from complete ban to the one. And other things in between. The indoor spaces that the park district are regulated by the when it came to the outdoor space, one of the challenges is actual enforceability. Because our police officers are the ones who carry tape measures to see if something is 50 feet as opposed to 49 feet away from whatever the intended measurement is. Some of those things were all discussed at the Park and Rec committee. Right now, the law is for handguns, for example. If you have a concealed carry permit, you have to leave your handgun in the park. And so in terms of enforceability, in terms of a recognized boundary where you say, look, I have a smoke here, I go out to the parking lot to do it. It seemed to be a ready, bright line boundary and one that was easily enforceable where what it's called to a dispute where somebody's insisting on smoking next to the grandstand, and he's there, just like with a permit problem, he can say, no, this is the rule, you need to go to the parking lot, and only in the worst case scenarios where people are insistent on some civil disobedience would we write a ticket, but we would then have the power to do so. So that was the idea of how in writing it we came to that conclusion. The golf courses were left different. We treat them differently. We sell alcohol there when we treat alcohol in the rest of the park system differently. And it's part of the demographic that we were trying to attract. And overwhelmingly there is a desire to be able to smoke while playing golf, whatever that's about. That's the customer base. And some of this is mission statement driven, and some of it's driven by trying to reach the market for making our products and services attractive to that market. That's why we've accepted 2 golf courses. And again, the Riverwalk is not exclusively our jurisdiction anyway. It has to go through any process. The process that anything has to go through for the Riverwalk, and that's through the commission, with the city, and us.
Rich, for the Parks and Rec committee.
Right, so this was discussed in committee, and as Ray mentioned, 3 residents and some of their children were here. I've had a chance to think this through a little bit since that committee meeting, and I guess just some thoughts. First of all, being in the outdoor event business for the past 13 years, I can count on one hand the number of times that I've encountered, as an administrator, an issue with smoking, and it really is an incident where someone's just being completely ignorant, smoking a cigar right, behind the ball field. And I know staff, I think during that committee meeting, shared some sentiments like this hasn't really been a major problem. We haven't had an influx of people coming forward complaining about this. Probably what's most compelling for me, having again thought this through since that time, is just taking it back to our mission: healthy lives, healthy minds, healthy community. And asking, and this is in a way echoing what one of the speakers had said, but I mean, with that being our mission, how could we possibly condone smoking in the park? I mean, it just seems contrary to mission, and that was one of the things that sort of struck me. We talked about enforcement, we talked about employee issues because it would apply to employees. And is it a major problem? No, probably not. Should common sense prevail? Yes. But I mean, it seems to me that there would be no reason not to move forward with something like this, especially as it ties to our mission. Just so in the instance where someone is, again, being completely ignorant, at least there's some backbone to someone saying, hey, can you go to the parking lot or something? There's some backbone to it. So certainly interested in hearing the other discussion, not only from the other members of the Parks and Rec committee, but from the board and staff. But at this moment, I'm inclined to support this ordinance, pretty close to the way it's been written here. Marie or Mike, any other?
So I was looking up with the National Park too, and they do have a smoking ban. Theirs seems to be mostly motivated by forest fires. And so because of that, they had some damages. They had what I thought were fairly, sounded like stiff fines, but when you consider what damage those people are causing, fairly light fines for smoking. But even with those, they don't plan on enforcing those. Their stated mission is they're really there for education, trying to educate people about smoking and trying to educate them not to smoke in the parks, rather than not worrying completely about enforcement. And I think that kind of seems to be something that we can duplicate also. Maybe we do that with a lot of our other ordinances too. We're not necessarily trying to jail someone for whatever reason they want to park. We're really trying to educate them on how to be a good steward.
You know, that's a great point with the, because we've gone through drought years here, if you remember. We're not going to be like a national forest, but we have something, Kevin, maybe I'm speaking, I don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, if you remember, we were 2 or 3 months and got the rain, and they were talking about canceling fireworks and everything else for the Ford, and that was 2 or 3 years ago. So that's, I think that's a happen all the time, but that's another great point.
Yeah, we actually do have the ordinance, smoking is not allowed in the woodwork. But again, you can't protect this.
No, I would support it. I don't think, aside from the place, nothing wrong.
I'm all for it. I guess where I did hit my giddy up is the golf courses. A couple weeks ago, my wife was out getting around with her father-in-law, so I took the kids to Springbrook and we were in the back patio, bunch of people smoking, and we were getting choked out. So I don't have a problem on the golf course proper. I used to smoke, and I was the only one in my group of courses that smoked. But if we're going to go this far, we need to be including the patios of the golf courses so that non-smokers can enjoy that just as well as smokers. They can go to the front. They can go to the parking lot out front. They can stand on the sidewalk. But in that area where we're sitting having drinks or trying to eat dinner, we should be able to go to that area to smoke.
We have a 15-foot rule now, right?
Well, the food service area is already banned by the Illinois Smoke Act. So if that person is acting illegally behind.
So we'll need to have the golf course staff monitor the back patios and kick out smokers. There was 10 of them. Easily. A couple foursomes got together. So if that's the
We
rule,
should add signage to do an education.
that's the rule.
Good point.
Good. Thanks for bringing that up.
And then the next steps will be, we'll bring this back to you for a formal vote at this
Yeah,
first.
I just have a couple of comments. I think first of all, the consistency with our mission, and I think that's clear. I do, on the other hand, have a concern about, over-regulation. Are we starting down a path that could lead to other situations? For example, if there's music in the park and people don't like music, people have dogs in the park and people don't like dogs, they're afraid of dogs, and we're attacked by dogs. So I think that's a concern. But just expressing those concerns, our mission here tonight on this discussion now is merely, do we have consensus to move it forward as an agenda? And I think it's very clear that we do. And I would ask that, or I'd suggest that commissioners take the opportunity over the next couple of weeks before this appears as an agenda to talk to people in the community and see what their concerns are, see what their thoughts are too. But certainly consensus to move forward as an agenda.
Thank you.
Right, so next we're moving on to item number, which one?
One. Southwest Community.
Okay, great. So the Finance Committee heard and saw this presentation at our meeting in June. And now we're bringing it to the full board, really in 2 parts. The first part, Eric and I are going to be talking about funding options for Southwest Community Park. And then Eric Schutz will be talking a little bit about the architectural and engineering services of the project itself. So with that in mind, everyone here knows Eric Anderson from Piper Jaffrey, and then this is his associate, John Balzac. So we're here, Eric and I are going to start, we'll jump right in. We hope this is interactive, so if you have questions, Mr. Digging a PowerPoint, please jump in. And then we also have, which I've talked about before to our group, about an interactive, I won't even say spreadsheet, an interactive model that their team really worked. I had a little input, but their team really developed, and it's really something to see. So we have to show you a little bit of that. Okay, great. And I do have hard copies. Figured if you wanted, ask her if anyone would like one now, and you can pass them out.
Maybe now would be a good idea, so that way we want to jot down any notes.
Good evening, everybody. And as Sue said, please jump in with your questions. I know there are some commissioners that may not necessarily be as familiar with municipal bonding. It does have a lot of restrictions. So I would encourage you to just jump in as you have questions. So a couple of different things to kick us off. Let's talk about interest rates to start off with. Interest rates have gone up versus last year. You can notice that really with the advent of the turn of the calendar this year, we've seen interest rates go up. We also saw I'm not finding it on there.
It's really blind. See it right there?
Oh, there we go. Okay, right here is late May. This is when we saw some volatility in the market, where we saw the 10-year treasury rate actually fall by almost a half a point in 3 days. And that was primarily due to Italy saying that they had some issues again with their finances. We've since kind of shrugged those off, but you can see that we are very news-driven these days. Part of that news is what the Fed is doing. The Fed is continuing to raise rates. We've now seen 7 increases since December of 2015. They meet next week in September, and then again in November. We expect out of those meetings two more increases. I think they have a meeting in December as well. So, as you can see, this is the 10-year MMD, 15-year MMD, just picks longer dated issues. MMD, what is that? That's like the Dow Jones of municipal bonds. It's the actual interest rate in either the 10th or the 15-year of the maturity of very highly rated bonds. Naperville Park District is rated AAA, so it's a very what we call index to cycles. It's an industry index as well. On the next page, even though we've seen those increases, this is really nothing compared to where we have been in the past. This again is the Fed funds rates. So we go back to the early 80s, very frightening time. You can see here, starting in 2009, for an extended period of time, we were really at the 0 to 0.25 line, that's shown here, and then they've had those increases of just a quarter of a point in each one of the increases. What has also happened since the last time that you adopted any type of bond issue is that we've had the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. 2 big things there. Number one, it eliminated advance refundings. We're not necessarily concerned about that. You have, the board has done current refundings. Current refundings are far more desirable than advance refundings for tax purposes and for flexibility purposes. Right now, we don't have any bonds that are callable in the near term, so it's a slight credit negative for you, but we're not too worried about that at this point. The thing that we also noted is that the top tax rate was reduced to 21%, and that has caused banks and some other investors to withdraw their appetite for municipal bonds. That has caused, in addition to the Fed funds rate going up, interest rates to creep up a little bit. Municipal bond supply, on the other hand, has been pretty substantially reduced in 2018, and so that is a little bit of an offset. All right, we're going to get into what you have. Before we consider how much or if you'd like to issue debt, let's find out whether or not you can issue debt. And the answer here is yes. You have $7.2 million of EAV from this year's assessment. Multiply it by this 0.575 percentage, and you're at $41.3 million of gross non-referendum debt. This is non-referendum. Referendum-wise, you're well in excess of 200 million, so we don't need to talk about that, especially we're not considering a referendum tonight either. We subtract from that your non-referendum debt that's issued and outstanding, yet to be paid, and we have about $20.8 million remaining as of today. We have maturities that are coming up at the end of the year and the first of the year in 2019. When you add those back, we're about $22.4 million, and that is a little over half of your authority. So significant authority remaining. And then as we look out into the future, one of the things we always want to be mindful of is we only recapture debt limit authority when you both pay down your debt and when your EAV changes. EAVs can change up and down. Lately they've been up favorably. We still have areas to grow in the district, so we do expect that you'll have continued modest improvement there. But we don't want to bank on that ever. And so in the next few years, notice that you're going to recapture about $3.8 million. So very important. We want to make sure that not only do we have the capacity to service debt, but we have the capacity to issue debt. This is the issuance side, and we do. Any questions on this particular slide?
I'm sorry, hop back one more in post-processing.
Sure.
You've got a 2019 bond down below 2015 to 2019. And up above you say December 2018, January 2019.
That's
Or is that not a January 2019 maturity? That's what's down there.
December 2019. This is if the world doesn't change. So this schedule says our debt service extension base, which is shown in that left-hand column. We're at $2,535,532. We know that to be fact, even though that's for next year's levy. Why do we know that? Because we're always 1 year behind. So last year's CPI of 2.1% applies to next year's levy. If CPI never grew again, the legislation was passed that doesn't allow for you to extend higher taxes. This is what we would be working with. So this is our baseline approach, effectively. Notice that we still have debt service extension base remaining in every year, and then long about levy year 2035, we're at 2.535 million, which is our full complement. Over the entire term, we're at almost $42 million. However, 0% is probably not the right value to choose. So the board in previous years has chosen to adopt a rate of 1.5% as the CPI moving forward. And the next slide shows that.
Can I jump in real quick?
Oh yeah, please.
So if you look at 18 and 19, you'll see there's two small amounts, 61,000 and 58. When we set our original plan back in 2016, when Southwest Community Park was scheduled for 2024-25, this was the roadmap that we approved back then, and now, of course, we're changing and moving that project up. So originally, you could see where our extension base really opened up in 24, 25, going over $1 million, where we thought we'd be at that point putting money into that project. So it just shows where we are, and it also illustrates we have a plan and here things change. So it's good we have the flexibility that we're able to move around, which we'll show you going forward.
Eric, just so I'm clear, the DSEB is the amount of bond payments in any given year that we can pass on to the taxpayer. So that $2.5 million represents the payments on the bonds.
That payment would represent both principal and interest.
So if you look at the DSEB remaining in your sum of $41.9 million, in theory, you could issue $41.9 million worth of bonds under this assumption.
Because it includes interest? No, not 41.9. It would be something less than that, and that's going to be dependent on what the interest rate would be on the term.
So you're saying you can't issue 0% bonds?
Not presently, no. So if we now assume 1.5%, and again, we know this is wrong. We're roadmap. It's conservative. We'll see that in a little bit. But 1.5% every year, we've not seen that passed. But again, we're just using this as our placeholder. Notice what happens to the debt service extension base. It turns out to be almost $56 million. So that's the power of compounding against today's value.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. Best time to ask it now. I'll throw it out there. If you want to address it later. So you referenced about a couple of years ago, we took a look at different strategies for financing. And we had a lot of discussion. How well did we do in choosing a good strategy?
Well, so in key, when we talk about the strategies, is number one, we want to fund what we need. And we want to do it in a way that is prudent, but also allows flexibility for short term, but also long term, to allow us to continue to fund new opportunities that come up. So here we are, from 16 to 18, 2 years later, talking about moving up a huge park development, close to $10 million, and having the ability to do that with some manipulation from operating funds. So I think we did pretty well. And hopefully what you'll see tonight from the options that Eric has put together, we hope to continue to do that, to allow for future opportunities that come up and to not tie the hands going forward and have to say we cannot do this project because we cannot afford it. So it's a balance between the two. Pay as you go and then long-term finance.
Okay, thanks.
So these schedules are busy. The next slide actually reduces this more to a pictorial representation. This is with no extension-based growth on the top, and then down below is 1.5% increase. Notice that in either case, we have room in between where the bars end and then the dashed lines. So we're going to continue to talk more about this bottom approach, and just know that the top approach is out there. But you can see that each year we have an increasing value, and likewise each year in our debt service, not each year, but we do have a process where we step down here. First step, second step, third step. That accommodates projects for the future. And that's been a real desirable approach that we've used, that the board has adopted for a very long time, and served me well so far. All right, real quick on this slide, this is what actual CPI has been since we were subject to tax caps. Here's the adopted rate of 1.5%, that's the solid blue line. If we lay over and say, what if CPI were to exactly mimic in the future what it mimicked in the past? This is what this shows down here. And notice that in all but 4 years, we've experienced CPI greater than what we're assuming going forward. Again, history is no predictor of the future, but nonetheless, when we take a look at history, we can assume here that we're using a conservative set of assumptions. Through May, by the way, we're at 2.9% CPI. So this year could be a little bit of an outlier in terms of what we've seen. High is 4.1, the low is 0.1. You see that right here and here. 2009, obviously, very difficult year. That was actually 2008. Again, and I'll just very, very briefly speak to this. If it was 2.2%, which is that average CPI, over that period of time out to levy year 2040, almost $7.9 million more of resources. So right now we're looking at that 1.5, but you should understand that if CPI was higher, then the district would have more resources on which to issue debt against. All right, so that's a little bit of the background. Now we're going to start talking about holistically looking at the entire district, especially because you have a very significant driver of your revenues, and that is this column called 7-cent general fund capital levy, which the district has levied now for almost 2 decades, I believe. And so this generates a significant amount of money, which then you use to fund capital projects on an annual basis. Essentially the pay-as-you-use approach, pay-as-you-go approach. Bonds are pay-as-you-use, and the annual funding through your capital levy is for pay-as-you-go. And so you notice here that totals up to about $175 million. Again, we're assuming here too 1.5% increase in the CPI. So in both cases, we're using that 1.5%. The freeze impacts on your operating levies, we don't show anything right now. We can certainly show that when we get into the spreadsheet. We have other revenues as well, WSDRA, grants, other. Notice here, after the 10th year, we took an assumption, we took 50% of what that last year was, which you can see was almost the lowest year anyway, and grew that at just 1.5%. 50% we thought that was a conservative approach to cut it at that point. You do have some debt certificate, debt service that's paid for out of operations. That, by the way, was debt certificates that were issued to acquire Nike Park. So very quickly, think about how long ago it was that we acquired Nike Park. It's not that long until those bonds or that debt service, which is right now paid from your operations, will be fully retired. We start with a funding value right now of $12.27 million. $3.1 million of that is cash in lieu. The balance is capital dollars in your balance sheet. And then and then these are dollars that are contributed each year. Notice a little over $250 million. $250 million sounds like an awful lot. Certainly it is. If we take a look and we say, well, what is that in today's dollars, depending on what you assume as the interest or the inflation factor, we use 4%, which is probably a pretty reasonable way to talk about capital construction cost increases. It's only about $132 million. So view that as about half, truly, in terms of like your real powers. Again, significant numbers, but let's not flower thinking and say that we've got over $250 million, because if we back that up to today's dollars, it's really about half that value.
Yep, and then there's one other thing to point out. If you look under the DSEP headroom column, that's you'll see it's starting at 61,000, totaling 55. That, when we say capital funding, that assumes we're using all of our DSEP every year. So what that means is, boards going forward, we have extension base, we are issuing that and we are using that extension base. So that's the way this model works, assuming that we're using that as one of the funding mechanisms every year for capital.
Excellent, because if you don't use it, it is permanently lost. Okay, next slide. Just shows in graphical format. Again, really highlights the general fund levy being about 74% of your overall resources. On the next slide, we looked at several different options. Up to 25 years in duration is what the park code allows for. You've not issued any debt beyond 20 years. That's the typical approach. Long-lived assets can be financed over a longer period of time. We looked at 15, 20, and 25 years. We looked at 10, not presented for your consideration tonight because that was going to draw too many operating dollars away from the park district. Regardless of if you do proceed and issue debt, because if you remember the levy years 2018 and 2019 had very minimal debt service extension based numbers, 61,000, I think it was 90,000, the district would be required to contribute dollars out of its operating funds to the extent of about $700,000 to $800,000, depending on the value chosen in terms of the financing. So here's just a, 15, 20, 25 years. This is the structures, how that might look. Notice in the very first one, we're coming very close to what the assumed debt service extension base increase would be every year. The 20-year really goes back and honors that step-down approach that has been picked by the board in years past. And then the longest, the 25-year maximum, does have the step-down as well. It also is the highest value in terms of interest expense, and it recaptures your debt issuance authority very slowly. That's a little bit of a warning sign from how we look at things, because there have been times in the past, most notably in 2008, where the real estate market had a pretty substantial correction. So when we would see our debt issuance capability be essentially frustrated, because we wouldn't have a sufficient amount of debt issuance capability in order to issue debt. And so we've rejected the 25-year retirement. We're really going to focus on a 15 and 20-year term. What are we assuming in terms of the funding option? We're assuming that it gets funded on or about December 1st. We're using 4% as an all-inclusive interest rate right now. That's higher than current market rates to the extent of about $700,000. So call that the financing contingency right now. Did mention to you before that we have 2 more meetings by the Fed that might suggest that interest rates could go up. The longer dated maturities have not moved in lockstep with how the Fed moves. So when I mean that, the Fed might raise rates by 25 basis points. That doesn't mean that the longer dated maturities would move in the same amount. All right, so we're going to use tonight a funding value of $11 million and show you 3 different options on this. This is the accelerated retirement, so we're retiring it as fast as we can. Notice that we almost consume all of the debt service extension-based headroom in many of the years. And you notice here that we really don't have too much to work with until we get out to levy year 2031. So these amounts aggregate to a very small capital project. And so this might not necessarily, well, what this means is that the district would be more reliant on pay-as-you-go as a funding option versus pay-as-you-use. What we also want to make note of is, because we don't know what the future lies in terms of CPI, we're going to have some debt service extension-based exposure, because we're anticipating that 1.5% amount. These 2 first years, 2018, 2019, those are almost lock solid, as I mentioned before. We know we're going to have to make those payments out of our operating funds. These are the years that we're concerned about right here. And they'll go away as each year we have CPI, and they may go fully away. But out of the starting gate, this is what our exposure would be. You may recall we talked about this exposure. Commissioner Riley, you asked the question, how did we do on the previous one? We sat and we said, what is our exposure relative to issuing debt? We went through that calculation. We shared it with the board. We have loss and cost dollars on our balance sheet. We said we can go ahead and take the assumption that CPI is going to go up. If it doesn't turn out, our loss and cost dollars will pay for it. That was only on a 3-year retirement. This is a little bit longer, and hence our exposure becomes greater. And it would certainly exhaust the Treasury on the loss and cost side. We have, I think it's $250,000 there right now.
270.
270.
In our debt service fund.
So, and here's the debt service extension-based consumption on the other side, and notice not too much room in those years. And this again is using that 1.5% assumption, and here's a 0% world. The custom approach says again that we are going to come very close to, for several years, our debt service extension-based limit. but we have more dollars earlier, and then it's really shown on the next page, especially, if you want to go to the next page, that our debt service extension-based exposure has been almost fully eliminated here. So this value, these two values right here, equal about $797,000. We know we'll make that payment. $815,000 represents the total, so another $18,000 out of the district's potential operating side of the house. So this is very, very manageable. And notice here, we go back to a period of time where there's a little resource, and then we have to step down for a bigger sized project, and then very significant sized projects in the future. Remember that 5, 6, 7 years from now, all of this side of the graph falls off, and we get 7 new years on that side. Questions on this particular approach? And the next approach is a pro rata approach, a little bit more expensive than what we're calling in this case the custom approach. Notice what happens though, for levy year 2020, you actually have a debt service extension based headroom of $462,000 approximately, and so that would allow for better, I would say, more funding capital projects through bonding earlier. And that's really shown on the graphical representation on the next page, where again, no debt service extension-based exposure, and that consumption is more level, but it would grow. Your availability would grow as this CPI, future CPI is experienced. I thought it'd be valuable to just quickly review your new money bond issuances. When we say new money, that's dollars for new capital projects. You've done other bond issuances well over the years. Those are refunding bond issuances. We're going to leave those alone because this was the original intention of this board and prior boards when you issued debt. So starting off with 2003, which is when I began to represent the district, 20-year retirement, 3, and then a couple more 20s, a 3, 16, 3, 16. So we had that back and forth approach that essentially funded to the limit your debt service extension base. This approach has really enabled the district to balance that pay-as-you-go and pay-as-you-use approach, and has allowed you to not only do that, but in conjunction with how you manage your other resources, and then the demographic area, which you don't really control, that has garnered your AAA rating. Well, we talked about $11 million as the amount. Well, what about other size financings? What about larger ones especially? So that's $11 million. Here's $25 million. This dashed line, by the way, is a beginning value of $5 million in the capital project fund. This was selected as the amount that we might not want to go below. And it graduates each year by CPI, using that 1.5%. So that's really a $5 million amount, no matter how you look at it, what year you look at it. Notice for a $25 million, we get close to those values, about double in the treasury. For a $40 million transaction, notice that for many, many years, we're well below that value. That could certainly cause pressure on your AAA rating, but it would certainly mean that you would be idle in terms of issuing any debt for a very long period of time, probably out 24 years. And that also would, we didn't look at it, but we can look at it in the dynamic portion. That would really cause some significant exposure from your operating funds and contribution. Whenever we issue debt, we want to take a lot into effect and into account here. And so we've talked about risk of shortfalls in future CPI. What is our potential exposure? What is the next time that you would like to issue bonds? the balance of your funding approach, retirement speed, certainly your AAA rating, we'd like to support that, and then what remains for other capital projects. And then likewise, would any referenda now and in the future make sense? We also want to consider how does this impact the taxpayer. So because each year you're already levying the maximum in terms of your debt service extension base value, and that debt service extension base would go up very gradually, and we're using a 1.5% increase. That would be experienced. You'd be looking at increases for that portion of your levy of between 62 and 90 cents. If CPI was double that, then you would essentially almost double this value here.
That's only on the debt, correct?
I'm sorry?
That's only on the debt
Just on the
portion.
debt.
If the 1.5% came true, if we ballooned the levy and overtaxed everybody, the actual overall increase would be larger. On the annual levy, not for the debt.
Not the debt, yeah, on the annual levy, by ballooning the levy.
The overall tax bill would go up.
Correct.
Well, under that assumption, by more than the 62 cents, for example, that you had in 2018.
Oh, sure, if you include the operating side of the levy as well.
Yes.
Yes. Right. Now, if you go back to that slide for a quick second, notice that's unrealistic as well. Future unfavorable financial shocks. So we've been operating under this potential threat of tax freezes for quite some time. I believe there's been 37 different bills that have been advanced down in Springfield that have talked about property tax freezes. None of them have gotten terrifically far, but there has been that constant for about, 5 years or so?
Yeah, our legislators were telling us it was gonna happen.
Well, it passed the House.
Then it passed the House, yes.
It died in the Senate.
Died in the Senate. So we want to be mindful of that. We've actually accommodated for that, just to show you what that might mean if we were to have a property tax freeze, and what that impact might be. Briefly, 2 years is about $6 million, I believe it was. It was a 2-year freeze, and that's a significant amount. By the way, that's a permanent, so that's just over the period that we examined. That keeps going on forever. So, based on what we've looked at, future issuance, flexibility considerations, lower operating exposures, we're recommending option 2 be implemented. Option 2 was that one that was called the custom approach. And the timetable, if the board found that agreeable, would be back a month ago. We introduced this to the Finance Committee. We're here this evening. You could call for a binding hearing and hold that at your August meeting. You don't have to go that fast. You can certainly slow that down. You could adopt the limited bond ordinance in November, so you notice there's a lot of time in between August and November. So we certainly could slow the binding hearing portion down, so you're obligated to both call for and conduct a binding hearing prior to issuing. That's essentially how you become authorized to issue. And then we would close on the financing on December the 1st. Again, as the point indicates, you can accelerate it. The schedule, you can also defer it. So we went pretty quick there. Lots of information to both disseminate to you, for you to digest. But we'd be happy to take questions at this point.
Does the Finance Committee have any commentary, any input?
Thanks to me first, Eric. What's up with that? I would like to see, and I don't have a problem with the recommendation. I would like to see a version of this before we actually go any further in terms of going to a binding hearing or anything. An example where we take your $11 million and we collapse the term and fund that partially with the $1 million in golf reserves and then the $300,000 annually that we've raised our fees. So use that additional $300,000 a year to collapse the term to protect that bonding in the future, to bring forward future projects. I'd like to see what that looks like personally. A couple months ago now, I think.
Can I
it
ask
was-
a question for
Yeah.
clarification? You said 300,000 out of revenues?
We raised fees to the taxpayers to cover credit card expenses
Right.
in anticipation of Springfield freezing, doing property tax freeze. Property tax freeze never materialized. We ballooned the levy, so therefore, in my mind, we have $300,000 that we could throw at this to shorten the term of the bond.
Put that back to staff and ask if that,
Well-
is that feasible?
I'm going to let Sue answer that, but let me just remind you, I'm glad that the press is here. Since 2013, so since 2013, that's 6 years, taxpayer on average of $375,000 home has seen a tax increase of $8 a year. I'll let that sink in for a second. That's $8 a year, $48 total over 6 years for the building you're sitting in, remediation of sportsmen's, central maintenance facility, nature center, how many dozen playgrounds? My point is, I think we've been very fiscally responsible toward the taxpayer, and I'm one of them. Now, we can argue, and we can certainly go ahead, Commissioner, and if there's a consensus to move forward with the Commissioner's request, we'll certainly do that. But you're gonna need to then change the policy of the golf reserve fund before we figure any of that, so there's some policy changes. The other point I wanna make is, we've always used the direction that you provided us as a board, that we only go out for debt for what we need. And evidence of that is the years with Westra. And you see the spikes up and down. Most park districts levy the full 4 cents every year. We do not. Now, we've had it in the past couple of years, we have a couple other projects. We are now, because we need it for ADA services. So we're applying the same philosophy that you all have directed us to do. So if we're gonna change that, then that's another discussion.
Well, I appreciate your sentiment, but to see a different example on there that might produce a better outcome for the park district, we should be able to see the example. And then we can argue for or against it. He may put it up and we can say, oh, holy hell, that doesn't work, but we're not seeing that up on the screen.
Well, I think when we're talking about this, and I welcome other commissioners to chime in, I think when we're talking about this, we're talking about just doing a what if that takes 300,000 out of revenues. I think that's an operational decision that has to be made before we just start doing what ifs. Because then we could be discussing something that's unworkable, and that's where we need staff input. But other commissioners are welcome to chime in.
Yeah, I have no issue seeing options, it's just a matter of what's, again, is it feasible? I mean, let's say we want to produce that option so we can consider it against the current option, is it even feasible to do? I mean, that's what I would need to know the answer, I would need to know the answer to that. And what would the effort be to create such an example? I mean,
I think, well, to start, I think Ray had a point of, first we need to look at fund balance policies and we are going to be looking at golf, but to wipe out 100% of the reserve for golf, that's a big decision and different than we've ever done.
That's one I would not recommend.
Right. And
Certainly from somebody that runs the park district on a day-to-day basis, I would absolutely 100% not recommend that at all.
That's all I'm saying, Bill, is that to have a, if you will, theoretical discussion, which is fine, on something that would really cut into operations, I think it's putting the cart before the horse. I think we need to have a discussion on operations, and if operations can be cut and, we cut the golf reserves down, then it certainly is, is worthwhile looking at it. Otherwise, I don't think it's helpful.
I just want to make sure I'm clear in this assumption about the golf reserves. Those reserves are in case we have unforeseen circumstances. Right? So I'm not really willing to say we're not going to have unforeseen circumstances. We've already seen unforeseen circumstances this year. But I think the example interesting, but I realize it'd be a lot of work to get there, and I'm not sure how valuable it would be, but is it a lot of work to do that, or is it a change in the spreadsheet?
No, I can certainly prepare that, have that ready for a future meeting. We built a work paper that accommodates a lot of options, not necessarily the one that was put up by Commissioner Egan, but a couple of tweaks and we can get there.
And then that changes our timeline too, though, right?
It could.
Yeah, and also something to think about is, in the past, when we issued DSEP debt, and coming from a conservative side, the repayment of that came through that extension base. So when we've issued GO, non-referendum limited debt, typically 100%, all those issues have come through the DSEP levy, so zero risk to operating. When we moved up Southwest Community Park, we're comfortable with saying we can take close to $1 million out of a reserve that we've had for capital because of moving that up to accommodate doing the project earlier than expected. But we've never in the past allocated operating dollars to manage a debt service payment directly built into a model. That is different than what we've come to you in the past for. The 2 years is a limited 2 years. We know we have it. It's a defined short time frame, but saying that that we're going to automatically take that fee, or whatever it is, something else out of operating, other than that 7 cents which you're allocating, it could add more pressure to our operating budget if those financial shocks do happen. And it could be for a long period of time. That's just something to consider.
Mike, Marie?
Sure. Why don't we?
If we just indulge us for a moment,
Yeah.
and we'll show you what the model can do. So, yeah, lots of information here, but it's dynamic in that there's an input section over on that far left-hand side. So right now you see that our annual revenue inflator, otherwise known as CPI, 1.5%. We broke it down in 5-year increments, except for the last 10 years. The annual expense inflator, we've used 4%. That actually might be a little bit too aggressive. Presently, the last 10 years, the average is 2%. This year, we're averaging 6.3 for the first 6 months. That's the Turner Construction Index. Last year, we were at 5%. The operating property tax freeze, let's change that. Watch column I. So if we say that, yep, we got frozen, what happened? What year was it effective? It's 2019, and it was for 2 years. What winds up happening? Well, that's what we just wound up losing. And so notice those minus signs, those are minus revenues because we no longer have that opportunity. Notice how real close that is to the $300,000 mark. So right there, we might need that $300,000 that we were talking about in terms of, that revenue source was a credit card fee or?
Yeah, we jacked up the cost on them.
Okay, so
It's actually, it's
We
not
raised fees.
$300,000. For this year, it's $110,000, and then beyond there, it would be just under $200,000.
okay,
And those were to cover the fees that we paid.
Those are to directly cover the fees that we pay for ActiveNet software as well as the credit card.
Right, so it's a wash. We're not taking money from the taxpayer and put it in a bank account.
But we had not previously charged those.
But it's not 300,000.
We ate it.
I thought
We ate that.
300,000 was the budget, but if it's 200,000, I stand corrected, and that's what I think we should charge.
But it's not 200 this year, is that correct?
Correct.
This year, it's not
actually revenue though.
Right, we're not getting it in. We're just-
We're covering a cost that we always covered in the past.
And it will vary. If we have a low registration year, we're not gonna, lower
It's a real number.
fees.
there's been a 4-year bandied about as well, and if you change that to 4 years, that really starts to dig deep into what the district's operating levies become. And it's over $15.3 million, and then upcoming 26 years, that's about project cost, including interest, of what was before you this evening. So that's the impact of what a property tax freeze could do. In column H, by the way, the reason those are shaded blue, kind of looks like it's frozen. Those are the years specifically that are frozen. I just want to pull those out specifically. So what else could happen? Well, the inflator might go down. So if we go up to levy year 19 before, and we say, well, you know what, we had some 0.7, 0.8 years. What if it was 1%? Let's draw 1%. Now suddenly we have less dollars in terms of our debt service extension-based headroom. Not terrifically shown because it's over a very small period of time, but nevertheless over that 20-year period, it does aggregate to a fairly large number. Which solution do you have? Here is this.
We have, let's see, pro rata.
Pro rata. So let's change that to custom.
And you still got a 4-year freeze on.
Yeah, I'll get rid of that.
And we still have the freeze, so let's get rid of that. Still substantial resources, but nevertheless, if you go back down to the, go all the way down, and we take a look at the original debt service extension base exposure, just a little bit further down. Not too much exposure there, so, but capital project account now in 2019 really approaches that $5 million mark. So there's getting more, I guess, more decision to do in terms of your policy making.
And what's the rosy situation at 2%?
So
President Trump's right, there's all kinds of jobs created.
fair enough. So we've got inflation now that you could put 2 there. And now that debt service extension base headroom is higher. And potentially appreciably so over an extended period of time. The expense inflator piece is also somewhat concerning. So if inflation is running at 2%, maybe that expense inflator is low. So if we would put 5% in B10, that's for the next 5 years.
Eric, what was your inflator? You have the number that you've studied historically. No, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
For the construction cost. What did we study?
That was, we have a second.
Oh, it was like, yeah, you did a study, it was on average.
In inflation, I usually work closer to CPI, and like we were about 1.5%.
It's the joint construction index, right?
Right, I just, we've talked before, highs and lows, you had an average of somewhere around 3%, I thought.
I mean, I know we talked about percentages of A&E services, but in case of inflation, I mean, sometimes it's 4 to 6, but lately we're going to sue, we're going to set at about 1.5 to 2%. And right now, our 10-year capital review, we're set at 1.5%.
Now, some more trying to say, let's look at historical averages. There's highs and there's lows. What's the stock market return on average? 10%. Highs, there's lows, there's busts and booms.
At 2.03% in the prior 10 years is the average. We had 2 years of negative, and the last 2 years especially have been close to 5%. And I said, first 6 months this year, 6.4.
One of the things we have to be mindful of is when we look at averages going forward and looking back, it's one thing to be correct to equal the average over the past 10 years or 20 years, but the timing of the ups and downs is significant. Because if you hit high rates early on, it has an impact later. So
Right.
you're going through what ifs for a long time.
Right. On that you had the 3 days where you had the 50 bip drop or whatever.
I think, you know, when we started working on this, the whole approach was, how do we be conservative and still get what we need done and provide the flexibility, the board flexibility in the next 3 to 5 years to take advantage of something popped and we have funding available, we could do a debt serve, just like we did for Nike. And I wasn't here, but I understand that's a perfect example of something that happened really quick. And because we have that flexibility and we're
see a reason to buy a lot of flexibility, given what we see on the horizon.
Correct.
That moving up Southwest Community Park is the biggest contingency out there, while we might have other things to think about, or unknowns that might come with new people. We don't want to buy too much flexibility.
Correct, because that's a lot of interest costs. We want to do the best we can, and that option two, we felt was right in the middle of conservative, allowing some flexibility, but not a whole bunch, because that will cost, that's additional cost to do.
Tell me why you recommend option 2 over option 3.
Sure, because of the interest cost. And just to Dirk's point, if we knew, we don't have any large projects that are on the horizon in the next, say, 2 to 3 years, where we say we know we're going to want to go out and underneath that issue debt. To buy that flexibility costs more interest because of the way it's structured. If you want to go back to that and look at how it's repaid, it costs more because we're paying more in later years and less down in principal in early years. So the whole debt issue itself costs the most of the three options, but yet does provide more, it provides the ability to issue non-referendum debt at a larger scale earlier.
Other questions?
I still have a question,
Yeah.
so if you want to let somebody else.
Fire away.
I don't know, May, April, Sue put together a memo, and probably with your help, to say what has the cost been because interest rates are rising on the delay. 2 months have gone on. I think that cost is about $2 million if memory serves. Has that cost gone up, or has interest rates stayed flat, or has the market priced in more interest since, I don't know, so May, June?
Go back to the presentation on slide 1. And we have a year-long picture here. So, and you said go back to about April. You can see that we've had some wiggles there, some volatility in the marketplace. But largely we've remained pretty flat from April till today. If you take a look either at the 10-year or the 15-year approach.
And then to extend that from today to what you're guessing for December, understand that's a guess, what's priced in?
Well, the market is anticipating 2 more increases.
So we can see another 50 bips could before we actually issue, if we stuck with the December issuance.
On the very short end of the curve, yes. On the very long end of the curve, it's really more market driven. So, we haven't seen, we did see some increases to start off the year. It's a little bit difficult to discern exactly what's attributable to higher interest rates and what's been attributable to the change in tax law.
Yeah, that's been interesting.
But to be fair, yes, we have seen interest rates go up since the beginning of this year.
Now, I guess my final question, so just for easy math, call it $2 to $3 million lost, and we also are paying the state of Illinois penalty. Can we get any of that back if we were to merge into the city of Naperville? Their strength combined with ours, does that get us back in at $2 million or a lower interest rate? Or do you need to pick that over a few days?
Merge into.
So if the city and the park district became a department of the city of Naperville, does that strength get us any better rates? Or they're AAA rated, we're AAA rated, we're both in Naperville at offsets?
I would not think so. Both pretty triple.
I think also that would be a difficult risk to sell. To me, looking at all this stuff, I mean, you've worked hard for decades, it seems to be what you call conservative, but I would call responsible. And, getting onto the fray edge of what is possible may be exciting to look at, but I'd also say it's fairly irresponsible. And I think you have to be a responsible steward and taking the risk. So anyway, I'm comfortable with what you guys have proposed. It seems like it's responsible.
anything else? Support.
I just want to say that our fund balance policies have developed over a very long period of time. I think it's what got us to the AAA rating. It helps to keep us there. I certainly would caution against us suddenly trying to change it to do something that I'm not sure that we need to do. I think the way we have operated has been very responsible and has maintained our AAA rating for God, how many years now?
It's been since the acquisition of Naperville Park.
2008.
Yeah, 2008. And so it's almost 10 years. So I think we should be operating within those same guidelines. This is my opinion.
You make a good point, is because it really is the former boards and leadership team put us in the position that we're in now, which is a pretty good place to be. Any other questions, comments?
I'll say that this is not, my area of professional expertise, but I think the both of you are very sharp. I think this was very well presented, and just listening to the way, you articulate the plan, it's clear that you thought about the taxpayer and that you care about being conservative and responsible. And, this certainly makes sense to me. I think it's a very thoughtful presentation, and clearly you wrestle with the issues and are really trying to keep this board on the side of, being conservative yet somewhat flexible, so it certainly makes good sense.
So what are you looking for from us?
I think we would need a consensus, because we've worked through the project, that if we are going to move ahead with it, that we would have consensus to order a binding hearing, which in no way commits us to issuing that, but it is the next step towards working to that.
Seems to me that there is consensus.
I'd still like to see that. But I'm on board. Delays cost money. Interest rates go up.
Very good, so we will move ahead, we will give you updated timelines, I'll give you a little bit more timeline. For the binding hearing, something typical, just as a heads up, that we typically do is sometimes we'll do a binding hearing for more than the debt issuance, just to have a little bit more out there, because they do last for 3 years. Doesn't mean we would issue debt at that amount.
And I'd just like to say, on behalf of the commissioners, maybe just speak for myself. Thanks for making an extremely complex topic pretty much understandable.
You guys haven't even seen all the taxes. It is very powerful.
Can't wait.
I just want to close the loop, so we'll plug in Commissioner Egan's request, the $1 million and whatever that number was. I don't know that we necessarily have to come back to a meeting to get data packet in.
No, just send it back.
Okay.
Send it in an email.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
very good.
Okay.
Now Eric is up for the second, other Eric.
So at the June 14th special meeting, we mentioned to the board that we're going to go back and look at the 80 services portion of the Southwest Community Park Phase 1 Site Master Plan. We identified, working with consultants, that the cost of the 80 services would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $450,000, which makes sense in the scope of work. With that being said, and looking at past history for the Fordville Activity Center and the non-park central maintenance facility, our recommendation is to release an RFP to consultants that we have an existing relationship with. We can do that in August and then bring a contract to board for consideration in September. So based on the direction of proceed with this project, I want to give you next steps in the release of AE services and keep the design side going. Just an update.
How many parties does that include, people that we've had a relationship with?
Right now, we're looking at between, I think, 6 or 7. We discussed it earlier today. And a lot of times what we found during the first phase, they may want to team up with different disciplines, and that's fine. As long as we get that exposure, and then we'll probably have a few proposals. We'll share those numbers with the board in a board packet memo, and then bring a contract for consideration. But we just want to let you know, as far as the magnitude of dollars based on the large scope of the project, that's what we feel is very comfortable, and we want to give you an idea. Now, as far as funding, We had 2018 capital dollars for the Southwest Community Park Site Master Plan. Based on the RFP process, we had allocated $92,000. We brought that in well over 50, so we have some money there already. So we're looking at $400,000 or $450,000 that could span over a 2-year period, late 2018, early 2019. The intent is to start construction in the summer of 2019 and then be done in like summer of 2020. And that's very similar to the Nike expansion schedule. We started in the summer, we ended in summer. So that's kind of what we're thinking right now from a planning perspective.
You don't see any benefit to issuing that RFP to everybody?
Well,
Cost-wise or?
Yeah, we've done that in the past, and what we find is just a lot of folks are from, out of state. I mean, we have an existing relationship. It's still going to be very competitive. I mean, obviously, those teams can team up with other teams that may not have a relationship with the core prime consultant do that. But like I said, we've done that in the past for other projects, and we did not find a benefit to that. So that's why we did it for the Portable Activity Center. We did it for the Naperville Center Maintenance Facility. I think what's important is, first and foremost, we're picking these firms based on qualifications. And then we look at fee. But if we have an existing relationship, we can also negotiate the fee up front. And so we're picking partners that we worked with other projects with before, but we're sending it to multiple partners, so we're ensuring we do have a competitive type background to it.
Anything else? Okay, so that's 2019 capital plan.
Yes. So earlier this evening, we held an open house to showcase 2019 capital projects ranging from playground renovations, shoreline restorations, to even the Southwest Community Park Phase 1 Site Master Plan. We gathered input, and as you may recall, earlier in the year, through our capital policy, we had discussions identifying priorities and which projects will we look at for implementation in 2019. Now, there's 2 projects in addition to that I want to touch on tonight. And the first one relates to this building, the Naperville Activity Center. And Brad has some information that he wanted to share, which I believe was also shared at the most recent Parks and Rec meeting.
Yeah, one of the projects that we'd like to consider and begin discussing with the board is actually a build out of this facility. When Fort Hill was first constructed, the area over the top of the child care, as well as WDS Array, which is a 1-story, was constructed to be able to take a 2nd story. And at that time, working within the budget, we could not build out that square footage of the space. And we also wanted to open the facility to determine what type of space would be needed in that area. What we have found is that our fitness memberships, and especially the number of members who are taking the group exercise classes, has increased significantly. Over the past year, we've had 1,700 additional members join the facility. Fitness members alone, we have over 5,000 fitness members at this point. That includes our Silver Sneakers and our Prime programs. We have 6,700, over 6,700 total members when you include those who are utilizing the track and so on. What we would like to propose is actually a build out of the space to accommodate another group exercise studio, a large group exercise studio. Studio A is one of the larger group exercise studios that you'll see in the different park district facilities, just over 3,000 square feet. And what we have found is that studio, we are maxing that out. We've got 7 classes on a weekly basis that are either near or at capacity in that room. We have 7 classes that meet weekly that average participants that cannot be accommodated within that room and have to use the multi-purpose rooms at this level, all 3 rooms at the same time, or they've had to move into the gymnasium. With those classes moving into the multi-purpose room, we've not been able to put some of the various programs that we would like to place within these types of rooms, and it's not designed, nor was it really intended for exercise space. This build-out would provide us with about 3,800 square feet of studio space. We would be able to move the cycles into that room, and would allow a lot more flexibility to be able to offer programs and offer more programs. Right now, about 20% of the comment cards that we receive from members are noting on those comment cards that they would like to see additional exercise classes available. So that is one of the projects that we'd like to begin proposing to the board.
We talked about this in the Park and Rec. Can you remind me what the price tag on the?
Yeah, it's approximately $2.1 million in total. And that includes premium time, so if we're looking to work on weekends and evenings to minimize the impact of this facility will still be operational. That's the number that we have at this time. And then also what we intend to do, if there's consensus by the board for us to pursue that project, is to bring it back at the August workshop. We have our mid-year budget review. We'll just have another conversation around this and then get the consensus to move forward to include this in our 2019 capital budget. Secondly, I wanted to talk about another project which was presented to the board earlier in the year, and that was the Frontier Sports Complex Public Plaza. Yesterday, we had a meeting with local stakeholders from the city of Naperville, Hitchcock Design Group, School District 204, Christine Jeffries. We talked about partnerships, and that group is extremely excited about the project. What we'd like to do as well is present to you and bring Rich Hitchcock back to do another presentation on that Public Plaza project and talk about phasing costs for that. We think a project of that nature would be an ideal alignment with like cash flow type funding that we have available with right now, which is about $3.1 million. Plus there's other developments in the area that we can utilize funds to support something like that. So what we'd like to do is present Rich Hitchcock the plaza and an update on phasing, and get a sense that there's an interest in that project as well for the 2019 capital budget.
That would be at the August 23rd workshop.
Yes. So it'll be those two projects, and it'd be just kind of a dovetail off of the mid-year budget presentation we got planned for the August 23rd workshop.
Works and Rec, have any comment?
Just going back to the project about the expansion of this facility, you know, I think operationally it makes sense. Do you have a sense from a pure financial standpoint how long it would take with the new 3,800 square foot space to break even on $2.1 million investment? I mean, again, forget about operationally, just purely from a financial standpoint, how long that would take to recover that?
I don't have that this evening. I know that one of the, in discussing with the fitness manager as well as the superintendent that oversees this facility, one of the concerns is that as we continue to grow membership and even the membership levels that we have now, is that we may get to a point where members begin to leave the facility if they're not able to get into some of the exercise classes. We have had some situations where members show up for a group exercise class and they're actually having other members tell them, no, the class is full, you need to leave. So we've had a few disputes there. But that's a number that I don't have to see.
I think that would be interesting to know. I mean, even if we baked in that analysis of potential memberships lost, I just think from, and I don't want to speak for the whole committee, but I mean, operationally, I think, you know, this place is busting at the seams that Brad described makes sense, but would like to know the break-even analysis on 2.1 million for 3,800 square feet.
From my perspective, I say you take all of that money and you shift it to Southwest Community Park and build another one of these down there for busting the seams up here. Imagine the demand down south. I appreciate we're moving up Southwest Community Park and the demand is there. We've got to also think about the south side residents. So spending $2 million and doing something down there and looking at the bonding, maybe there's something that we can do. If not, defer it and hold it.
I think to build a facility of this magnitude with water, I think I sent those numbers out to you, that's a referendum. There's no, it's 100%, no possible way we can build anything like this without going to referendum in 2020 or every election year.
I can say anything about water.
Okay, take the water out. There's no way we can possibly build this down in Southwest Community.
We're just running out of exercise studio, and this is the obvious place to do it because we already have all the support structure to do that. And we can do it by just building up this 3,800 square feet.
And quite honestly, I have not seen the demand for another one of these buildings down south.
And this is a discussion we've had previously.
Doesn't mean that can
Seems to be
change.
consensus.
You're correct. That could definitely change.
We all hear different things. I'm just bringing my perspective.
Anything else on capital projects? Questions, comments?
Are we starting on the showers renovation here, or the
Scrap that.
scrap?
Yeah.
Okay.
We did a deeper dive on that, and not a need.
Okay.
No pun intended.
Okay, 311 Parks System update.
Yes, included in the weekly packet was information on the current status of our 311 system. As I stated, working with Omar and IT, we wanted a method of how to track resident calls, whether they were concerns, compliments, or just what was the nature of the call. So Omar did his homework. He went out and found a reasonably priced 311 system, similar to what many public works, city agencies use. And we actually piloted it within the Parks Division based on emails and phone calls that we received, and we inputted the data. And on May 18th, that went live on the website, and it became more apparent that residents were picking up more on it. So I gave you some numbers. As of the date that I wrote the memo, we received 187 total comments. As of that time, 157 closed and addressed. We still had 26 currently. Open can mean still, it's a tree to cut down, it's not a hazard tree, or weight. It could be a natural area that's open with some weeds, and do that type of work in the fall. So those are just the examples. And I did let you know that the bulk of the calls are not new. Those are very, very common. We do get comments on trees and limbs, and come and get your tree off my fence after the last storm. In the spring, when we have heavy rain events that may cause delays in mowing, grass will come. And at that time, we're going to double mow. But when we mow the next week, then it's fine. So we're going to be able to address the remaining part of the year, obviously, and then in 2019 be able to compare times of the year to see where we're getting these calls. Are they similar to the same part, to the same location? So we can look at how they
Can I ask you a question? I noticed very early on, will you be looking at developing standards or guidelines as to, for every 100 calls, no more than 20 should be open at any given time, or?
So each resource depending commissioner, and at that given time, we have to be able to have the team to send to address it, because then we're taking them off of other services.
But you will be tracking it year over year to.
Correct. And by location, by park.
I'm sorry, 311 gets its name because people died. Now 311
We're non-emergency, yeah, that's how we got it.
Yeah, it's a very common moniker used, 311, and that was actually some of the systems we were looking at. What we ended up deciding on was actually a ticketing system that I modified to, altogether collectively, we modified to fit this need, but it's really just a ticketing system. It has the 360 response.
But we won't have that phone number.
No, it's not a phone number. So it's 311. It's 311 parks.napervilleparks.org. It's also embedded in the latest version of the mobile app. You just hit the button, it says 311 Parks, and it takes you to the screen. It's what we demoed on the screen. Yeah.
And a key part of it too is that it's provided the resident does reply. It does include their email.
Yes.
The manager can directly answer.
Great. I think the improved communication with residents should go along with that. That's great. Okay. Next is Centennial Beach shallow end painting.
Yes, we wanted to inform the board that we're currently going out to bid to have the shallow end at the beach repainted. This project is extremely time sensitive. That work would be performed approximately within 10 to 14 days after the close of the beach. As we wait for chemicals to dissipate, we pump it down to the deep side to let the contractor come in then and prep and paint this entire shallow end prior to the leaf fall, because we don't like to have leaf marks in paint, when it's drying. So that will be coming to you at the workshop, just because of the technical issue.
Okay. Next is board documents management system.
Over the last few weeks, Omar and I have been looking at options to reduce clarification, if you look in the packet, I gave kind of a comparison of our current process versus board docs. It's accessible, it's transparent, it will really improve our efficiency. We will be issuing everyone for these meetings a device that.
I gotta turn on the projector.
I'd like him to show you what it looks like, so
Yeah.
like the searchable programs.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be.
Yeah, and one of the really nice things is, you know, it's archival and we can search. So every document on a topic, we can do a word search and bring it up. So if you want to know when we discussed Southwest Park, we'll bring up every document.
One example comes to mind, Bill, when you asked about pickleball. You just punch it in and boom, everything's coming up when it was talked about. To your point.
Not to jump ahead, but in that same vein, I had a question too. So you're taking from that conversation, we're gonna scan in the old packets and minutes in PDF readable format or whatever, so it is searchable. At some point.
I think it would be very prudent, and our recommendation would be to start from this moment going forward with some topics. For example, if we want to use pickleball, we can make that conservative effort to start digitizing some of those old records. But there's a lot of time and effort that would be putting past history into the system. So it'd be more prudent using our man hours and everything to do it moving forward.
And the cost analysis that I provided with you in the packet has been, we refined it quite a bit.
Sorry about that. In the meantime, while it loads, what I can show you is the device that we chose. The solution that we're going to recommend is device agnostic. So you can use an Apple device, a Microsoft device, Google Chrome, which is what this is a Chromebook. One of the reasons why we decided on this one is that this comes with a stylus, and you can also use it like this. You can use it like this, and look at the documents, do that kind of stuff. You can also fold it up and use it as a tablet. So it gives you guys, as board members, a lot of flexibility. Total cost of this device is $427, which is very, that's why they're used so much in the education space. We could, by all means, purchase something like a Microsoft Surface tablet, but that's $400, and then they sell you the keyboard for $150, and then they sell you the pen for $100. We were also down the road of going down to a Microsoft device. We'd be having to get licensing for antivirus, licensing for a mobile device management solution. We'd be having to get a lot of other things there as well. So I will pull up the cost analysis first. I just sent it off. Yeah. There we go. I'll show you the cost analysis. There's a lot of assumptions in here that I'll go in detail about. So the three solutions that we looked at were board docs, Laserfish, which is what we currently have, and Granicus. Granicus is what the city uses. It's very robust. It is a good solution, but they have a proposed year after year 7% increase. So while initially the first year it looks like it's cheaper than board docs, it quickly becomes not as cheap or as cost effective. The other thing to note here in Laserfish is that this is only for 10 users. So what we looked at as deliverables here, and what that means is 10 users is that only you guys would be able to search that repository, look at those documents, look at those agendas, minutes, and all that stuff. No, the public wouldn't be able to go into this. So what we were looking at as deliverables were unlimited number of users, unlimited number of storage. That's huge because to give you an idea, just as our shared files at the Park District, we've got well over 2 terabytes of storage of files. Not to say that the agenda and minutes would get to that point, but eventually it would. And Laserfish charges, I believe, it's $15 for every 10 gigs, so that would add up pretty quickly. We wanted a cloud-based solution to reduce the overhead costs on us, having the storage and the servers. We wanted something that would allow for policy development and publication, You know, there's just a long list of deliverables, right? So that's where we started. Here is really where it all starts to really make sense, and we actually save money the first year, second year, third year. We actually save money going forward by going into board docs, and we gain a lot of efficiencies. To give you an example of some of the liberties that we took in doing this analysis, an average board packet is anywhere from 50 to 70 pages to anywhere between 300 and 400 pages. An average paper ream is 500 pages, and we pay $3 for that. So that means every sheet of paper costs us 0.006 cents. We also pay per print 0.0059. We don't pay for toner, we don't pay for repairs, but we pay per print. That's where our agreement is with our printer services. So a total of 1 year of just printing black and white is costing us $460. Total 1 year of just paper is costing us $460. So taking all those things into consideration, here, the cost of delivery, just as another example, what we took was the average cost of someone driving around for 10 miles on the cost of 1 gallon, average cost of having a police officer, one of our police officers out there, and that's where we started getting these numbers. So with our proposed solution, this was what our first year would cost us. This is what status quo would be. And then this also, I was very conservative here in the third year of adding, replacing all these devices. Realistically, they could probably last us 4 to 5 years. I'm just accounting for something software related, like Chrome comes out and says, hey, we don't support this one specific thing anymore, or you can't do this with this device anymore. All of a sudden we have to replace it.
One thing is clarification, which the device he's showing you, you would not take home. It would be here for you each time you came into the meeting, but the board doc that he'll show you in a second, you would access from your own computer. So if you want to bring your own computer, you wouldn't need this, but we would load these and get these all ready, so when you sit down, you'd be ready to go, but you wouldn't have to take it with you.
So what we're going to show you is actually the Elmhurst Park District and what they have, and how they use it. If I can,
And this will be what the public sees. It's customizable security to the text.
Yeah, I can something in. No.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to-
Oh no, you got a 404.
Yeah.
That's a fishing thing. That's one of Omar's traps. It's a trap. Admiral Akbar.
Yeah, you know what? Let me.
It's a trap.
I have it up on this. But of course I can't show you.
Board docs out. Google Wheat Crust.
Here we go. That was close. So yeah, here would be an example. This is actually the school district, because we found the park districts using it's the same premise. As you can tell, it's very widely used by a lot of organizations. So here would be an example. There was a special, you know what, let's pick this one. You'd be able to go view the agenda. There'd be things as far as the closed sessions posted. There would be, let's see if there's one that has an attachment, because that's where it becomes really cool.
So as you go through the meeting, you would click on the agenda item, and if there
paper and they're gonna print it out anyways, you know, you gotta ask yourself, okay, is this the right solution for the 7 people that are involved? So I mean, I think we should, can't disagree with anything you're presenting here, but I think we need to make sure that, you know, we're not all paper and pencil people and we're sitting there thinking, well, this is great, but hey, can you print out for me, you know? I mean,
That is a good point. Would any of the current commissioners, any of the current commissioners still want paper?
And if you go, you can print,
Yeah. So this is now
specific topics.
to a good example. This is a pretty good example where you can actually pick, you know, for example, a report. You click on the report and then if you pull it up, you'd be able to see the report in detail. And then if you were so inclined to print it, you could print it.
So you wouldn't have to pick up print the full packet to get the information that you need. You could just pick and choose.
That's
This mobile device ready to, right?
Yeah, you can use it from a tablet, a laptop, phone, and that was actually one of the big deciding factors in using this. You picking this device is that it's so flexible into your own preference. Like if someone wants to treat this like a laptop, you can. If you want to treat it like a tablet, you can.
Well, Vice President Jan brings up a good point. We did try this a couple of years ago. Kirsten Young and myself had this idea of we get a paperless board packets. So we get the laptops, and long story short, if you wanted to check, for example, an email, by the time you open up the laptop, got on, and shut it down.
text Omar for your password,
Yeah.
isn't
I was already on my phone 10 minutes earlier. Yeah, so it was very, very cumbersome. This looks to be certainly what
It's night and day.
like when I.
It's not downloading a huge document, it's every single item.
It's all web-based, so that's why it presents it to your phone. And if you look at this, you know, this is where like you, as a resident, someone can come in here and, I don't know, I'm just shooting at the dog thing. I'm sure they got lots of things that have the word park, or maybe too many. But you'd be able to go in there and search for these things. See, this is how many times the word park has come up in, you know, lately. I'm sure there's plenty more in a policy, minutes, but that's the transparency we'd be able to provide that to anyone.
I've used Board Docs and actually implemented it, and your analysis is dead on. I think the biggest adjustment will be for you as staff and encourage you to work paperlessly, but this formatting stuff, you write the memo, send it to Ray or whoever to get approvals back and forth and post it, versus doing this and printing it initially and then scanning it in, which may be as you start to get used to it, but that whole process that you use internally can be greatly improved efficiency.
We'll start talking about the process and how to incorporate it.
Yeah. I'm all for it.
Yeah. Looks like a good solution.
Yeah, if you guys, if anyone's interested in building it, I'll keep it around for after the meeting. Check out.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Okay, next is the Naperville Labor Day Parade participation.
I just want to get an idea of who will be available for the Labor Day Parade. The Monday, September 9th, starts off from Riverwalk North at 10, heads up in Met Central. We have Millennium Dance Company, and we have Fort Hill Band. We have a little staff in Fort Hill. That's one March. I'll send out a calendar invite tomorrow.
So I know it's early, but everybody know if they would participate. I would. Probably. Yeah, so we'd have program participation, commissioner participation, so yes. Next item is the September 27th, 2018 regular board meeting, which conflicts with the NRPA conference. So in the past, when we've looked at this, we have two sets of choices. One is we change it to a different date in September, Or do we simply cancel that, or not schedule that second September meeting? So I guess the question of whether or not we could do without that meeting really falls to staff as to how much it looks at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what's in the, it's hard to say what's in the queue, you know, right now. As I stare at Eric, as he starts thinking, what would, you know, may be there for approval.
Yeah, nothing comes to mind. I mean, we need to get to the main meeting in September to do it, but as far as having that workshop, I don't have anything pressing.
Any other staff members? And I would say go ahead for the meeting.
Great. Seems to see.
We still public notice, so
Scrap
people
meeting.
know.
I'm okay for scrapping it, before you officially do it, that next.
Okay, let's move on to department updates. Richard Buchanan, administration. You done? Okay. Finance? You done?
Just we're
Okay.
starting to work on the 19 budget.
And the one we always wonder about,
We'll
HR.
take care of that in exec session.
All right. IT, anything else?
Just a reminder that the project for the sand is coming up, and I'm still gathering pricing, so you'll see it soon in the memo.
Marketing and communications. Anything to report? Parks and golf.
On the park side, as you know, we wrapped up with Fest, preparing for Indian Day Festival, and then last spring, which we are waiting on revisions of the agreements. As soon as we get it, we will send it to you for review. Mowing is catching up finally, allowing staff to work on much needed projects. We only have our summer out for a few more weeks, so we'll be going back to school, so that'll be very, very helpful. On the golf side, July started the tournament season. On July 9th, we had the Brooks Junior Tournament where 80 players participated. The Naperville Men's Amateur Championship occurred on July 14th and 15th. Through off and on rain on the 14th. 128 participants were in that two-day tournament, up from 115 from last year. Our other two majors coming up are the Women's Invitational and the Senior Amateur, both of which have great interest as of right now. Through the first half of the year, however, due to rain, our rounds are down by about 7%. With the warmer weather here in July, it's picking up again. Golf, as with many other of our businesses here, is very weather dependent. The construction on the cell tower at Springbrook has been completed. Work will begin soon to place the receivers from the provider side there. And that's it.
On the last fling agreement, is that for this year or next year?
This year. We still have 2 months.
Next, planning.
To echo Sue's point, we're currently working on the 2019 cap. That's all.
So you have no color rules to
One
pass on?
thing that.
We all got over this question. Unless we want to go back over it.
Recreation.
Just a couple of events to note coming up, new events, Rock the Hill, coming up next Friday, August 3rd at 7 o'clock, Fame the Whole TV play. Then the following night at Rotary Hill, we have Star Wars Rogue One, we'll play as part of the half night movies. And then Sunday, August 12th, we've got RX for Nature, special event downtown with Nature Center, number about the activities, session. And then as Kevin mentioned, this is the time of year we're getting close, I believe, but we start losing a number of our part-time staff these days, so we're getting back to school. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Next item on our agenda is future meetings. We'll have a regular meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners August 9th, 2018, 7 p.m. Naperville Municipal Center Council Chambers, followed by a regular meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners August 23rd, 2018, 6:30 p.m. in this location. Next item on our agenda is executive session.
Move to adjourn to executive session under 2C1 personnel of the full meeting day.
Second. A motion and a second, any discussion? Richard, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Buchanan?
Yes.
Commissioner Todd?
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson?
Yes.
Commissioner Regan?
Aye.
Commissioner Ensign?
Yes.
Commissioner King?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes. We're adjourned, time is 8:24.
It seemed like the gentleman from Jansen.
Send it forward to the approval structure.
Yeah.
Isn't as robust as I would have liked, but it worked.
Yeah, we would have had to,
And then only give one or two the power to publish publicly.
Yeah, yeah, and we didn't get the, I mean,
the pro, what was it, the pro, we could have gone through a nice tree, it was
You can always upgrade, but yeah, that's out of everything that I looked at.
That was the best, yeah.
User-friendly, the public, you can get that stuff, and
I love the security. I mean, you can make, like, Elmhurst doesn't post their draft minutes until they're approved, but I could attach the minutes and you can look at them.
right,
So
and you can do that
and you can,
and make it, you're just flipping a little dot or whatever, and
yeah.
making it public, not public. I used to have all kinds of like attachments and stuff that the public couldn't see, certainly subject to FOIA, but they had
Yes.
FOIA.
I appreciate your guidance and input because that's implementing it will be interesting. But I think it sounds like it should be easy.
And I'm a fan of bringing the devices to and from because I don't know, maybe my ego in play that said, don't give me one because nobody's going to use it. And we bought 6 out of 7. What was that one? Oh my God.
So the Wi-Fi went out.
on what?
On here. The Wi-Fi went out.
Okay.
And it stopped recording. It shouldn't stop recording because the Wi-Fi goes out.
It shouldn't.
But it did.
Did it?
Yeah, I caught it. Katie was sitting next to it and saw it right as it went out. Yeah, so I caught it and
So I don't know if but like I said, we look at replacing that one too. All right, I'm out of here.
see ya. You stop working. It's out. It's not supposed to stop working just because the Wi-Fi goes out. It's supposed to keep recording. I just lose connection and I can't see from my phone. But it did. We didn't lose very much. Wait, where's my duct tape?
No. Get duct tape on there.
Seriously, I think it's a cost efficient.
Well, where else are you supposed to?
I'm gonna buy some little Velcro or like a string.
Anyone for pizza before I take it to the...
So,
To the workers?
No, thank you. I think we're ready to go.